The motion sensor tripped at 1:47 in the morning. Not an alarm, not a siren, just a silent signal pulsing across a wire into a bedroom 6 miles away, where a state game warden snapped awake, looked at the monitor on his nightstand and knew, after 27 years of ghost stories and missing batteries and unsolved break-ins, that tonight, finally, it was over. He went from his bed to the Pine Tree Camp dining hall in under 5 minutes. And what he found standing in the doorway,
Hello?
backpack full of hamburger meat and
Is anyone
marshmallows,
in there?
was not the hardened survivalist he had imagined.
Don't move.
It was a clean-shaven man in a Columbia jacket and new-looking blue jeans.
Who are you?
Carrying moldy money.
Just
he hadn't
passing
spent in
through.
nearly 3 decades.
Stop right there.
The man didn't run. He didn't fight. He dropped to the ground the instant the warden shouted and lay there, perfectly still, in the darkness he had called home since 1986. His name was Christopher Thomas Knight, and the story of how he got there and what it cost him to stay is one of the most psychologically complex, technically meticulous, and quietly devastating case files this channel has ever opened. In the spring of 1986, Christopher Knight was 20 years old, and by any external measure, he was on track. He had graduated high school in central Maine, enrolled in an electronics program near Boston, and landed a job installing home and vehicle alarm systems. He had a rented room. He had a new car, a white 1985 Subaru Brat. He was, by every visible metric, a young man entering the world on schedule. Then, less than a year into that job, he quit without notice, didn't return his tools, cashed his final paycheck, got in the car, and drove south with no destination and no one to tell. He spent days in cheap motels, eating fast food, drifting through Florida, and then turned north again. And it was somewhere on that drive back through New England, no dramatic moment, no single revelation, that the idea arrived. Not a plan. He has said repeatedly there was no plan, just a direction. He drove until the road narrowed. Then he took a smaller road off that road, then a trail off that. Then he parked, left the keys in the console, and stepped into the forest. He took one backpack. He never came back. What makes this case clinically remarkable, and what separates it from every romantic notion of going off the grid, is what happened in the first weeks. Christopher had no hunting gear, no fishing equipment, no foraging knowledge. He had basic camping supplies and some food, and when that ran out, he ate roadkill, raw, no fire, because fire meant smoke, and smoke meant detection, and detection was the one thing he had already decided he could not allow. From day one, concealment was the primary protocol. Every other survival decision flowed from that single, non-negotiable rule. And it's that kind of thinking, systematic, layered, engineering-minded, that we've seen before in the isolation cases this channel covers. If you watched our analysis of Nutty Putty Cave incident,
It's here.
you'll remember how a
found it.
single environmental constraint forced
Now
a
to see if
chain
it
of
holds.
adaptive decisions that ultimately defined everything. Christopher Knight's entire 27-year existence operated on the same principle. One constraint, total optimization around it. No exceptions. He drifted south through the Maine woods until he found an area with 2 lakes, a cluster of seasonal cabins, and a summer camp nearby. He didn't know it yet, but he was less than 30 miles from his childhood home. He tried multiple campsites over several months before he found the right one, a dense, disorienting patch of forest threaded through with massive boulders, sitting on a 220-acre parcel with only one year-round house on it. In summer, the area was choked with mosquitoes and poison ivy, which kept hikers away. In winter, snow drifted so deep into that hollow that locals avoided it entirely. He was, in effect, hiding in plain sight, the nearest cabin just a few minutes' walk from his tent. Game Warden Terry Hughes, after personally seeing the site years later, said, "If he wouldn't have shown us a spot, we probably never would have found it." The campsite itself was a study in functional engineering. Underneath an old carpet, Christopher had built a subfloor using stacks of old magazines and electrical tape, at least a foot deep, creating a level, insulated surface that also drained rainwater. The walls were green and brown plastic tarps over large black garbage bags, forming an A-frame structure roughly 10 feet tall and 12 feet long. One end served as a kitchen, a Coleman 2-burner stove on milk crates, cooking supplies hanging from rope lines, a pan, a pot, a strainer, a spatula, a cup. The other end was his bedroom. A dome tent placed inside the A-frame for double insulation, with a twin mattress and box spring on a metal bed frame, wooden blocks under each leg to prevent punctures. Clothes were stored in sealed plastic tubs. Flashlights, portable radios, and books were organized in milk crates. He had a dedicated rain collection system, a tarp rig between 4 trees feeding into 30-gallon garbage cans, with coffee filters for purification. When the water turned green and thick, he used it for laundry. He had a wash station with soap, shampoo, and detergent. He had a designated refuse area. He had a waste pit. What Christopher Knight built in those woods wasn't a campsite. It was an operational facility. And here's where it gets technically impossible to dismiss. He maintained it, improved it, and survived in it for 27 Maine winters. The kind of winters that dropped to negative 30 Celsius, without ever once lighting a fire. That single fact deserves to stay with you for a moment, because it's not just impressive. It's the kind of thing that, when you run the numbers, shouldn't be survivable. Hypothermia sets in at core temperatures that can be reached in minutes of exposure at those temperatures. Christopher's counter-protocol was as precise as a flight operations checklist. Every autumn, as cabin owners shut down for the season, he began his winter preparations, upping his caloric intake, specifically increasing sugar and alcohol consumption to build body fat. He stockpiled non-perishables, clothing, and propane tanks. He typically burned through 10 tanks per winter, from November through April. He enforced a strict movement blackout. No tracks in the snow meant no trail to follow. He grew a beard to protect his face. He slept under multiple stacked sleeping bags. And he ran a rigid thermal schedule. In bed at 7:30 p.m., awake at 2 a.m. Not because he preferred it. Because 2 a.m. is statistically the coldest hour of the night in a Maine winter, and he needed to be conscious to manage it. He would light the stove, melt snow for water, walk the perimeter of his camp to circulate blood, air out his sleeping bag, and shovel accumulated snow from his structure. Then he would wait for dawn, every single night, for 27 years. He later wrote from jail that there were winters he came close to dying, that during those moments, he meditated. He said, "I didn't meditate every day, month, season in the woods, just when death was near." But surviving the cold was only one half of the equation. The other half was food, and this is where the case takes its most morally complex turn. Christopher Knight was not a hunter. He was not a forager. He was a thief. A highly systematic, disciplined, low-signature thief who committed over 1,000 documented break-ins across 27 years, targeting only seasonal cabins and one summer camp, never touching year-round residences, never taking laptops or TVs or anything that would trigger a serious police investigation.
Silent.
He took food, batteries, books, clothes, propane. He studied the residents of North Pond, memorized their schedules, learned their patterns. He timed his operations to new moon nights, maximum darkness. He preferred rainy nights, rain mass sound. He avoided Memorial Day and Labor Day weekends. He waited for the first and last weeks of cabin season, when occupancy was uncertain and residents were distracted, and when the community began installing security systems to stop him. He adapted using the exact technical knowledge he had gained from his last job, disabling sensors, removing memory cards from invisible cameras. The same skills that had put him on a conventional career path became his survival toolkit in the forest. Locals in the North Pond community spent years trying to profile him. They found patterns. He preferred peanut butter over tuna fish, chose briefs over boxers, wouldn't take food that had already been opened. They called him the Mountain Man, then the Hungry Man, then the North Pond Hermit, though for 2 decades they genuinely weren't certain it was one person. Some speculated it was teenagers. Some thought it was a woman.
The board requires a vote on the matter.
2004,
if you are in agreement, please raise your hand.
So people present how many had experienced break-ins. At least 75 hands went up. It had been 18 years, and the thefts continued. One family spent 2 entire summers hiding inside their dark cabin, waiting for him to appear. He never did, because Christopher Knight didn't just know the woods. He knew people. He knew that humans follow patterns. He knew that patience is the most underrated tactical advantage there is. He had in the most literal sense. More time than anyone looking for him. And then there's a question that every psychologist, journalist, and investigator has circled without ever fully answering. Why? Christopher himself couldn't fully explain it. There was no documented trauma, no abuse, no criminal history. His record was completely clean at the time of his disappearance. His driver's license the only paper trail, which expired in 1987 and was never renewed. He hadn't been reported missing. His family, a private, self-sufficient rural Maine family, assumed he had gone off somewhere on his own. He described himself in high school as invisible, not miserable, not bullied, just absent from the social machinery. Smart, quiet, a few good friends, genuinely interested in computers in an era when that was unusual.
Nothing more to say.
And then one day, without a triggering event, he stepped sideways out of the world. He said, "I had no one to tell. I didn't have any friends. I had no interest in my coworkers." Not bitterness, just a clean, clinical accounting of absence. He hadn't felt connected, so he stopped pretending to be.
I saw.
The psychological analysis conducted after his arrest produced no
everything.
consensus. A forensic psychologist hired by the state evaluated him, found him fully competent, and offered 3 tentative possibilities: Asperger's syndrome, depression, or schizoid personality disorder. Multiple clinical psychologists reviewed his case.
Yes, I stayed.
None agreed. One said, "Nothing makes complete sense. The complexity of the case is so puzzling, you could go anywhere diagnostically. What is clear is what the isolation itself
24 hours in detail,
When officers first brought Christopher to the Pine Tree Camp dining hall after his arrest, he answered every question truthfully and without hesitation.
I haven't been in this sector before
but wouldn't
today.
make eye contact.
I am
and
seeking
seemed
placement for myself and
unnervingly
my
calm.
brother.
An hour and a half in, they had his name, by the way he spoke. It was immediately obvious he hadn't used his voice in a very long time. Each word, officers noted, was clanky and hard to get out. He knew his birth date. He had to do math to calculate his age.
You don't remember
When asked where he
anything about
lived,
that
he said,
night?
"The woods." When pressed for
Not a
how
single
long,
thing?
he thought carefully and asked Officer Vance what
Never
year the
tried.
Chernobyl disaster had occurred. She told him 1986.
What is your current age?
He said, "That's when I took to the woods." He didn't know the name of the pond he had lived beside for 27 years.
What is your current age?
He didn't know the name of the township, Rome, Maine. He had stepped so completely outside the shared framework of language and place that geography itself had
That's
become
when I
irrelevant.
took to the woods.
He was charged with 13 counts of burglary and theft. He pleaded guilty to all of them. He was sentenced to 7 months, which he had nearly completed during pre-trial detention. He was fined $2,000, distributed to victims. He was ordered into a co-occurring disorders program and 3 years of probation. And through the letters he exchanged with journalist Michael Finkel, the only communication he accepted during his
The court finds in
incarceration,
favor of the plaintiff.
something emerged
The
that was
motion is
almost
granted.
harder to
It's
process
over.
than the wilderness years themselves. Christopher found jail devastating in ways the forest had never been. The noise, the people, the filth, the constant artificial light. He wrote, "I suspect more damage has been done to my sanity in jail in months than years, decades in the woods." He couldn't relate to other inmates. He stopped trying to talk to them. He found the structure of incarceration,
Watch where you're going.
total removal of autonomy, more disorienting than anything he had navigated alone at negative 30 degrees. When he was finally released, he went to live with his mother and worked dismantling engines at his brother's scrap metal yard, a job that kept him isolated, paid no cash, and required no social performance. All he wanted, he said, was to go back to his camp. His story sparked a cultural response that revealed as much about the people reacting to it as about Christopher himself. Phone calls and letters flooded the jail. Marriage proposals, cash donations, offers of land. People wanted to meet him, film him, publish him. Some were angry he had stolen from them, stolen their sense of safety in those lakeside summers. Others couldn't bring themselves to condemn a man who had done, in the most radical possible way, what so many people fantasize about, walking away. But what Christopher Knight actually demonstrated isn't the romantic fantasy. It's the cost of the real version. The real version is negative 30 degrees at 2 a.m. alone, with failing eyesight and aching teeth, walking in circles to keep blood moving, meditating to stay alive, knowing that a single spark of smoke would end everything. The real version is 1,000 thefts you feel guilty about every single time. The real version is that when you finally come back, you don't have the language for it, literally. The words come out hard and clanky, like a machine that hasn't been used in decades. The real version is that the world outside moved on, and you're standing in an evidence room somewhere, holding $395 in moldy bills, unable to remember how old you are without doing the math. In the years since his release, Christopher Knight has stayed largely off the radar, which, given his history, is perhaps the only outcome that makes complete sense. He would be in his early 60s now. Michael Finkel's book, published in 2017, remains the most comprehensive document of his time in the woods. Forensic psychologists still use his case in discussions of voluntary social withdrawal, extreme isolation, and the adaptability of the human mind under conditions that should, by most clinical models, produce psychosis. He produced none. He produced order. He produced a subfloor made of old magazines and electrical tape. He produced a rain collection system and a thermal sleep protocol and a 27-year operational security record with 0 injuries, 0 illnesses, 0 contact. What that says about the human capacity for autonomous existence and what it says about what we actually need from each other is a question this file cannot close. It can only record the motion sensor trip at 1:47 in the morning. And somewhere right now, there are people who heard that story and felt, for just a moment, something they couldn't quite name. Not admiration, not horror, something in between. Something that sounded, if you listen close enough, like recognition. This is the Terrifying Interesting channel, and this file is now closed.